The bad optics continue on immigration for a president who now insists he has no interest in photo ops. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Doug McKelway. Brett Baer is on assignment tonight. A president who frequently disparages Washington may in fact be glad to be back here tonight. President Obama has put significant geographical, if not political distance between himself and the continuing immigration crisis on the southern border. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry reports tonight from Austin, Texas, where the president could not escape the growing turmoil earlier today.
One day after explaining away his decision to skip visiting the southern border by insisting he's not interested in photo ops, President Obama held a photo op over a cup of coffee in Austin, feeling the pain of a University of Texas student who had written the president about both of her parents losing jobs.
Part of what touched me in the letter was...
And when the president tried to keep a speech today tightly focused on his economic message, a brief mention of immigration reform sparked an angry outburst from protesters on the left who think he's been too eager to deport illegal immigrants.
I'm sorry, what are you yelling about now? Hey, sit down, guys. I'm almost done. Come on. Sit down. I'll talk to you afterwards. I promise. All right? I'll bring it back. I'm wrapping things up here.
Back in Washington, Republicans grilled the president's Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, about whether the $3.7 billion emergency budget request misses the mark.
While the president is seeking billions for the admission, detention, and care of illegal children and adults, only 45.4 million, it's my understanding, is requested for the Department of Justice's adjudication and immigration proceedings.
This request has the right focus on deterrence, added detention, and removal.
Republicans are skeptical after the president on Wednesday appeared to offload the responsibility on Congress and Texas Governor Rick Perry.
I suggested to the governor he has, I suspect, some influence over the Texas delegation, and that might be helpful to call on them to pass this supplemental right away.
Perry put the onus back on the president, saying he should not have rejected a direct plea to send the National Guard to the border.
I don't know whether he heard what I said, and because a leader acts, and what I haven't seen out of this president are actions that make me think he understands what's going on.
While their meeting, at least on the surface, was more cordial than either side expected, the flashpoint was the president refusing to visit the border.
This isn't theater. This is a problem. I'm not interested in photo ops. I'm interested in solving a problem.
That comment quickly went viral, the president's critics starting the hashtag #NotInterestedInPhotoOps, connected to a stream of tweets with photos ranging from the president shooting pool at a bar in Denver a few nights ago to some infamous selfies with prime ministers and baseball sluggers. And today, when senior advisor Valerie Jarrett herself tweeted a pic of the coffee photo op in Austin, the senior advisor was mocked on social media, while a fired-up Speaker of the House unloaded on the commander-in-chief.
This is a problem of the president's own making. He's been president for 5.5 years. When's he going to take responsibility for something?
Two other big moments at this Senate hearing. Administration officials said without new money, they're going to run out of beds for the kids in August. Meanwhile, when Republican Lindsey Graham pressed on whether these kids are being turned over to adults who are here in America illegally, administration officials admitted they simply don't know. And Graham's response as to whether these kids will ever show up at deportation hearings, 0% chance. Doug?
Ed Henry in Austin, Texas. Thank you, Ed. A federal judge is ordering the IRS to explain under oath how it lost all those emails from former official Lois Lerner. The judge gave the tax agency a month to submit the explanation in writing. Lerner is the central figure in the scandal over the targeting of conservative groups for extra scrutiny. The IRS says it lost the emails in 2011 when Lerner's computer crashed. Meantime, an IRS employee has agreed to a 100-day suspension for urging callers to vote for President Obama in 2012 while working on the customer service helpline. You could soon need protection from President Obama's Environmental Protection Agency raiding your paycheck. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen tells us about another big power grab for the EPA.
As bureaucratic nightmares go, the Internal Revenue Service garnishing your wages to collect delinquent tax debt is among the most familiar because it's been happening for decades. Now, however, under a new proposed rule, the Environmental Protection Agency would also be able to garnish wages without a court order to collect unpaid fines and interest imposed on individuals found to have violated environmental laws.
I think that the Obama administration, it's a way to use the EPA to implement policy that they can't do through legislation. And they operate with significant revenue inside their own legal system, this administrative legal system, and they set the rules of the game.
As legal grounds, EPA cites the Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1996. The Obama administration claims that law empowers all federal agencies to garnish wages, provided they develop the same due process protections built into the IRS enforcement model. Some agencies, like the Department of Education and the Federal Trade Commission, have already adopted the practice. EPA told us administrative wage garnishment would apply only after EPA attempts to collect delinquent debts and after Treasury attempts to collect delinquent debts through other means. The agency also provides notice prior to any wage garnishment action, the spokesman said, including the opportunity for the debtor to review, contest, or enter into a repayment agreement. It also outlines procedures for a hearing at the debtor's request.
One of the tools of last resort is wage garnishment. And so what they're doing right now is just complying with that law.
Critics argue EPA has a track record of mismanagement and bullying, sometimes levying overwhelming fines for minor, even non-existent transgressions, and as such should not be invested with IRS-style powers. 3 GOP senators have written to EPA Chief Gina McCarthy demanding the rule be withdrawn.
I think the IRS should not. They do have that power, and they use it. I don't want that power extended to the EPA, specifically when we see the abuse by the EPA in this administration.
This rule goes on the books September 2nd, unless EPA says it receives adverse comment by August 1st, in which case it said it would withdraw the rule. We asked how many adverse comments were required, and EPA told us, quote, any. Officials there also confirmed they have received such comments today. So the fate of this rule, Doug, appears at this point very much up in the air.
Thank you, James. Stocks were down today. The Dow lost 70.5, the S&P 500 off 8, NASDAQ fell 23. The White House says it is talking with the German government about its decision to kick out the CIA station chief in that country. Berlin's dramatic move comes amid allegations that 2 men have been spying for the U.S. Relations with Germany are already very tricky after revelations that the National Security Agency had been monitoring Chancellor Angela Merkel's cell phone. This is a Fox News alert. Breaking news on the Israeli situation right now. We have learned President Obama spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just a few minutes ago about the violence with Palestinians Hamas. And the White House readout says, quote, the president expressed concern about the risk of further escalation and emphasized the need for all sides to do everything they can to protect the lives of civilians and restore calm. The United States remains prepared to facilitate a cessation of hostilities, including a return to the November 2012 ceasefire agreement, it says. Correspondent David Lee Miller is in Jerusalem again tonight.
Israeli forces continue to mass near the Gaza border, preparing for a possible ground invasion. Some 20,000 reservists have been called up, bracing for what could be a bloody confrontation. In the last 3 days, there have been over 800 Israeli airstrikes that have dropped more than 400 tons of explosives on Gaza. At least 87 Gaza residents have been killed. Palestinian officials say more than half of the fatalities are civilians, mostly women and children. 600 others have been wounded.
We're doing everything possible not to hurt civilians. And if there are any innocents that are hurt, it's because Hamas hides behind Palestinian civilians.
For the first time since the current conflict got underway, there have been Israeli casualties. 2 soldiers at a base near the Gaza border received light to moderate wounds from mortar fire. Meanwhile, much of Israel endured more than 120 rocket attacks on Thursday.
That's from Gaza.
In the city of Ashdod, about 15 miles from the border,
we need to go undercover.
A rocket set a car on fire, but no one was injured. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem also came under attack. The UN Security Council convened an emergency meeting to try and resolve the conflict. The Palestinian representative demanded intervention.
The Council must bear its responsibilities. It must act to protect the civilian lives, de-escalate the current crisis, and salvage the prospects for peace and security in our troubled region.
Israel's UN ambassador played the council the warning siren heard before a rocket attack to demonstrate what Israelis endure.
15 seconds, that's how much time you have to run for your life. Imagine having only 15 seconds to find a bomb shelter.
Despite the escalating violence, Israel today allowed some 200 trucks hauling things such as food and fuel and other vital supplies to enter Gaza. It's an effort to try and avert a humanitarian crisis, especially if Israel launches a ground invasion. Doug?
David Lee Miller in Jerusalem. Thank you, David. Up next, the latest on the fate of the U.S. Marine held in a Mexican jail after one very wrong turn. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Boston with a house fire that has left 7 people dead. The blaze tore through a 3-story apartment building in Lowell overnight. Fire officials say about 48 people were inside when the fire broke out. Fox 26 in Houston, where a 34-year-old man is facing charges in the deaths of 6 family members. Authorities say Ron Lee Haskell surrendered after a multi-hour standoff. 4 children among the dead. A 15-year-old survived. And this is a live look at Los Angeles from Fox 11. One of the big stories there, Game of Thrones leads the way with 19 Emmy nominations. Fargo, American Horror Story, Coven, Breaking Bad, and The Normal Heart were right behind. Also nominated, the episode of the satirical web series Between Two Ferns, the one featuring President Obama. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.